Hey America, how you doing? My name is Terrence Barker and I have something to say. All right, you guys, my name is Terrence Barker. As you already heard, I had created a video not too long ago about knowing your roots so you know what to cut off and keep. What I'm going to bring to you today is something that I am bringing with a heavy heart. To give you a little bit of background about myself, I've served in the military for years. I'm a three-generation vet, dating all the way back to my grandpa, my father, and me. So I am a patriotic individual. So I do this because what I'm going to say in this video is something that I see that we all kind of need today in America. I see something that is going down and it is very divisive right now. And I need to put this out. So take your time and listen to it because what I'm about to say is something that needs to be said. And I do this because, not because I hate America. No, I love it. But I'm doing it because I love it. And this is a part of my heritage as well as your heritage. So I'm not pissing on anybody's family or anything like that. But in order for us to make it through, we're going to have to tell the truth about some things, okay? We're going to have to understand our past. We're going to have to know what our roots are so we know what to cut off and keep. And that's what I said in my last video. Now I'm going to give you another line today, another quote that I want you to understand and keep with you as I go through this video. All right, and that quote is this: as long as we got lions telling this story, the predator will always be believed and heavily honored. All right, now let's get to it. All right, so let's talk about heritage. Heritage is great. Heritage is dope. I love heritage. My heritage is actually your heritage. I am an American. So since I am an American, all parts of American heritage is also mine as well as yours too, if you're an American. Okay? However, there are some things that we have to understand about our heritage. All right? Now, when it comes to this Confederate thing, there are two sides of the story. One of it is the Confederacy was about states' rights. That part is true. And then also the Confederacy is about heritage. That part is also true. But we also have to say the other side. On the other side, what they're talking about is that the Confederacy was about slavery. That is true. And then on the other side is the Confederate flag is about hate. That is also true. So both sides of this argument is telling the truth, but one side of this argument is telling it in more of the favor of themselves than actually what is going on. We could probably both agree on that, but after this video, we might have some disagreements. All right, let's go down to it. First off, when it comes to the Confederate flag, most of what we see today is the Virginia rebel flag, or the newly erected dixiecrat flag, okay? The Confederate flag does not look like that rebel flag. Matter of fact, what we know as the stars and bars is not actually the stars and bars, okay? So let's break that down. The Confederate flag is actually this. Boom, that one right there, okay? It has its stars in a circle, but the bars are going across this way. Another thing is, here are another different versions of the Confederate flag because they had three of them. All right, that was this one. Now that kind of has the rebel flag as we know it today, you know, but it has that white. Then we have the flag right here, okay, but it has that red. That is also known as the bloodstain red that is on this Confederate flag. So when people say that this is their culture, one, you're not telling the full truth. That's not the real deal. Why? Because you got the wrong flag. You need to be rocking the right one if you're going to rock it, okay? Make sure you know your history behind the flag. Now, let's go a little bit into how this rebel flag, or the Virginia flag, Dixiecrat flag, came about. The year was 1948, and a familiar phrase of states' rights was in the air. As a matter of fact, it was also known as the States' Rights Democratic Party, the Dixiecrats. Now, the Dixiecrat Party was a unique party. They were about maintaining their heritage of separation. So what was on the ballot this time, and what was on with many southern states, was the keeping of segregation and Jim Crow laws. Many of their policies still echo today in many different forms: big business, big money, healthcare rights, job rights, and certain programs of entitlement only for them. Everyone else, they were on the back burner. The military just desegregated, and they feared society would too.
13 southern states are represented in the uproarious session which precedes the nomination of Governors Thurmond of South Carolina and Fielding Wright of Mississippi as party standard bearers. Governor Thurmond attacks the civil rights flank.
It simply means that it's another effort on the part of the president to dominate the country by force and to put into effect these uncalled for and these damnable proposals he has recommended under the guise of so-called civil rights. And I'll tell you, the American people from one side or the other had better wake up and oppose such a program. And if they don't, the next thing will be a totalitarian state in these United States.
A fourth party is born.
All right, guys, as you've seen in that video clip, that was the Dixiecrats. That was their party's flag. That is how that Southern flag got re-erected. It used to be Robert E. Lee's flag. Okay, but then they started erecting that as a symbol of their Southern pride for the party. And their party, as you can see in that video, was heavily against the civil rights and black people. It was all about white supremacy. Now, you might be saying to yourself, hey, well, the Confederacy was about state rights. Or some people might say the Confederacy was about slavery. Both sides of that is true, but we have to sit here and break things down, okay? Let's not take my word for it. Let's take some of these Confederate people's word for it, and also the state's word for it. So basically what we had was the South tried to compromise first, and what they tried to do was the Crittenden Compromise. The Crittenden Compromise was named after Crittenden himself. The Crittenden Compromise was a failed attempt to put slavery permanently in the Constitution for those that were south of the border. And it was also to rewrite the Constitution on 6 different parts. The Crittenden Compromise proposed, never approved, consisted of the following 6 amendments to the Constitution. Slavery would be prohibited in all territories of the United States now held or therefore acquired north of the latitude 36 degrees 30 minutes. Congress was forbidden to abolish slavery in all places its jurisdiction within a slave state, such as a military post. Congress could not abolish slavery in the District of Columbia so long as it existed in the adjoining states of Virginia and Maryland, and without the consent of the district inhabitants. Congress could not prohibit it or interfere with the in-state slave trade. Congress could not provide full compensation to slave owners or rescued fugitive slaves. No further amendments of the Constitution could change these amendments or authorities of an empowered Congress to interfere with slavery within any slave state. Now, after the failed attempt of the Crittenden Compromise, the Confederates decided to form their own United States. It was called the Confederate States of America. And here is a quote from the Vice President of the Confederacy himself, Alexander H. Smith. Our new government is founded exactly upon the opposite idea. Its foundations are laid, its cornerstones rest upon the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man, that slavery, subordination to the superior race is his natural and normal condition. Alexander H. Smith, Vice President of the Confederate States of America, explaining why they seceded from the Union, March 21st, 1861. All right, that was the story about how the Confederacy was about slavery and also white supremacy. Now it's time to tell the other side of this story about how the Confederacy was about states' rights. All right, I plan to keep this thing fair and balanced as I always promised, okay? But what I'm going to need you to do is listen up because I got a missing piece of the puzzle. Also, at the same time, I actually have an audio clip recorded of a Confederate soldier telling his side of the story on why the Confederacy was fighting. You got to listen closely to this. And then we have to put it into context with other documents from the Confederacy and the Confederate States. That way we can remain fair and balanced to answer all this. Because this is a touchy subject. It is something that has been very divisive on both sides. So just listen up. Take your time with me. I'm glad you follow along, but here it is.
The sergeant blew a bugle. We 150 of my company fell in, and as soon as he finished calling our names, a number of us rushed up and said, "Sergeant, what does the half flag mean?" His face fell. He says, "President Lincoln was shot last night." Well, the feeling, the variety of feeling that came over us 20,000 men in just that one. Of course, there were several other prisoners, as you know. But as for me, and a boy, just 19, I didn't know what to think. I couldn't feel any hatred toward Mr. Lincoln, especially. I didn't feel any special hatred toward any federal soldier. And when I began to think how kindly General Grant afterwards, on the 9th, well, this was just before, acted toward General Lee, I felt kindly toward him. Now, comes up the question of what we Southern soldiers fought for. My friends, as a boy of 16 and a half years old, I didn't think about any abolition of slavery. My mind wasn't developed enough to take in what the politicians had in mind, and hence there was no trouble as to the freedom of the slaves. About half of the Negroes, my father's Negroes, left and went to Norfolk to be under, as they considered, protection, but another half, 40, 50 of them, remained and cultivated the crops until after the war. The South did not fight for the preservation or extension of slavery. General Lee, as is well known, was making arrangements to free his Negroes, and his father-in-law had already drawn up a part of his will, free his Negroes. My friend, it was a great curse on this country that we had slavery, and I thank God that I did not bring up my boys and girls under a system of slavery under which I was brought under. What did you boys fight for then? Here's what a great many people do not know. That as a young man that way I couldn't understand it fully. But I look back now and see my part in it and saw what we struggled for. And that was for states' rights. For states' rights. And as many of you know, immediately after the war, the rights of the various states, well, especially in the South, were very much curtailed, if I may use that word.
All right. Now, you heard the Confederate soldier side. You heard some of the bits of what the South was doing a succession for. Now let's look at the missing pieces of this puzzle. All right, you know what I'm saying? Because for some of you, after hearing that Confederate soldier, you might be like, hey, that's the end of the game, baby. That's it. That's all I needed to hear. There was a guy that was on the ground. He knew what it was. But then you got to remember, he was also a Confederate soldier. So we got to look at some things objectively. So to do this, we got to look at the missing piece of this puzzle. Because, you know, one thing that always stuck with me When I was up in school, everybody said that Lincoln was our savior. But then I had read one thing from Lincoln that really messed me up. And Lincoln, loosely put, said something about, he wasn't in the mind of freeing the slaves, but he freed the slaves because he could free the North. So he came out with that quote, and that always kind of stuck with me, because it was like, okay, was it about slavery? Was it not about slavery? Since Lincoln wasn't really the savior, what was really going on? We got to really answer some questions about what happened. And guess what? I found the answer to that. Well, at first you have to understand how big business slavery actually was, and actually how well it was for the rest of the world. Cotton was king. Here is a statement about how cotton was king back in the day. Without firing a gun, without drawing a sword, should they make war on us, we could bring the whole world to our feet. What would happen if no cotton was furnished for 3 years? England would topple headlong and carry the whole civilized world with her. Save the South. No, you dare not to make war on cotton. No power on the earth dares to make war upon it. Cotton is king. Senator James Henry Hammond of South Carolina, 1858. Missouri was a part of the Louisiana Purchase, and there was a great divide between northern and southern states, slave states and free states. Missouri decided to be one of those states to become a part of the slave states. So this brought a shift in power between North and South. When it came to voting power, the slave states would have had 12 to 11 seats. So they came out with the Missouri Compromise to help along this. The reason why this was important was because not only just political power, but also economic power. Cotton was king. By you owning cotton and having slaves, you could sure make a huge profit. Why? Because all your labor was free. So what this meant for the northern states is that they couldn't keep up or compete. Why? Because they didn't have the slave labor. So the South had all the political power coming their way, and the North didn't like that, which brought about the Missouri Compromise that lasted over 30 years. So, after 30 years of straight prosperity with the Missouri Compromise, there was another uproar in the financial and political power realms. The uproar was over the Kansas-Nebraska Act. This was pioneered by a guy named Stephen A. Douglas, a Democratic senator, who wanted to build a railroad through Kansas and Nebraska. This railroad will require support from the Southern Democrats. Stephen A. Douglas, he believed in popular sovereignty, which meant states' rights was back on the table again. That's right, political power and an economic system that was built upon the backs of slavery. Cotton was king, and also economic power was king. All that came from the power of slaves. Why? Because your labor was free. And although the North, a majority of them opposed it, the law still passed through, the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which made a large political divide throughout the nation. This later led to the Crittenden Compromise and other proposals that, you guessed it, ended all in failed attempts. So with that said, some states started seceding from the Union. And here is a list of some of those states on what they said and believed. So, what do we got? We don't got the right flag. We got a party that tried to say that this was their heritage, but it was really about supremacy and against the civil rights, which is how this flag got re-erected. Then we have the false story about that the Confederacy was only about state rights. We're not answering about what rights to what. Slavery. We've been lied to. We've been had. What do you think now? Do you want that to be your legacy to your kids? Is that a part of what your family represents? Do you want that to stay up in your doors, man? Do you really?